Welcome to Film-Studio-Taku-in-Japan. The X Summit completed today, and as much as I wanted to hurry and get this one out, I wanted to really take my time and get as many of the facts straight as possible, which is pretty much impossible, which I'll touch base on a little bit later. But sorry I don't have his name in front of me, but the gentleman who hosts the thing, good job. I think the acting classes are paying off, and it was nearly Star Trek OG level acting. So I'm not going to go into every little detail here. I'm going to first give you just the basics of what was announced, and I hope you enjoy this backdrop. A little bit of a reason for this is because I am a GFX shooter. I use a 100S, and my primary lens is a 250mm lens. I often use it with the teleconverter, the 1.4. So I am pretty much the prime candidate for one of the lenses that was announced today. I'd like you to kind of look at my footage as an example, real world example. None of this is edited other than cutting out a few rough transitions, but it's still pretty raw. And I know sometimes I struggle with my horizons. Please forgive me. So anyways, I think that, yeah, I'm prime example of what you can do with the GFX system for wildlife. And Fuji probably should have sent me that 500mm because I get a lot closer in than most. So what was announced before we get to the GFX? My bread and butter is the XT50. The XT50 was announced, which is the long overdue predecessor to the XT30, I believe. So, this should be a very, very big upgrade for anyone coming from that camera. Obviously, it's going to have the new X5 processor in it, which is pretty impressive for such a minimalistic camera. Something really interesting on it. At first, I was kind of like, but it's got a film sim dial, which I think is almost a good idea. I would even say is definitely a good idea for this particular camera because the user base, is not going to be familiar with menu diving. The new users, let's say people who are just right now moving up from a smartphone, and even as a big massive GFX, I'll call myself a professional. Okay, I'm a professional user, and that's kind of convenient just to be able to flip through the film sims like that without menu diving, because sometimes I am shooting and I just like, this is just too much contrast for the situation, the shadows are just too dark, I want to flip to something else and find that right balance, and sometimes I don't know exactly what I'm looking for until I see it. So rather than menu diving, clicking on a sim and then going back and checking it, this is a really quick way to just flip through them and see what they look like. That's a nice idea. I would say a better idea would just be to make that programmable and be able to switch with a button, switch to your front dial for that mode, which is usually your aperture or your shutter speed. But to be able to flip back and forth between shutter speed or aperture and the film sim type dial, rotary thing, would make sense. It'd be good. I would like it. Please add it to the GFX line. So on that camera, though, it's got IBIS, which is a huge upgrade. It didn't have IBIS before, and I think that's really significant because not only does it just show that they can put IBIS on such a small body, but it means they're taking the user's request seriously, and that likely virtually all Fuji cameras moving forward, except for the tiniest little point and shoots, are going to have IBIS in there. So that's great. 7 stops IBIS. That's more than enough. And it's 40 megapixels. Now that is also very interesting because that's bringing it up to that GH2 XH2S. I started on a GH2 XH2S level, or is that the XH2? I forget which one is which, but either way, 40 megapixels, more than enough resolution. So that's basically all I got to say about that camera. It's going to be a nice little camera. Almost tempting for me, maybe. We'll see. I'll look into it a little bit more for maybe a family camera. Everything that's announced today, by the way, I'm just going to say it right now, is coming in June. Pre-orders are already available. And affiliate links below. So, anyways, So along with that, they also announced a new APS-C 16 to 50 millimeter 2.8 to 4.8 LMWR lens. I was initially thinking, why bother with a variable f-stop on this one, but it's only 230 grams, so that's the answer to that question. It's a tiny, lightweight lens, which again makes sense for pairing with the XT50, but 230 grams for a travel camera is about right. And LM on that lens is very important. If you don't know, LM is linear motors, which basically just means smooth autofocus, no herky-jerky action. It's a good thing. And it's got a 0.3 times magnification. In other words, it's what we call a pseudo macro. I usually say about 0.4 is where we come pseudo macro, but it's getting there. It's close. They're touting it as close focusing at 15 centimeters from the front of the lens, or 24 centimeters, which would be from basically the sensor, I believe. And again, I'm always a little pessimistic. I'm trying to be more optimistic lately. I was thinking 15 centimeters, that's 6 inches. That's not that close for macro type work. But then I remembered it's a 16 to 50, and this is APS-C body, so that's basically a 75 millimeter at 6 inches. That's significant. That's good. The price on that lens, by the way, is $699. They'll have a kit for the XT50 with the 15 to 45 millimeter, which has already been announced long ago, lens. That is going to be $14.99 for that kit versus $13.99 for the camera alone. So just $100 extra, you get a lens. Or with a new kit, the 16 to 50, you can have it for $17.99. And again, not bad pricing wise. That's a considerable discount there. Now we're getting to what I want to talk about, okay? And GFX users, again, just reminder, all this stuff you're seeing here was the 100S and the 250 millimeter lens, with or without the teleconverter. I do switch it up. Fuji, send me the 500. But anyways, and let's talk about that. Let's start with the 500. Let's not start with the 100 too. And that's what 100S too. And that's what they did actually, wisely. So the 500 millimeter GF lens, it's a 5.6 RLM OIS WR. So WR is weather resistant, OIS, right? Optical image stabilization. LM, again, those beautiful linear motors. What else would you put in a wildlife lens? The R? I don't remember. What is the R? Somebody remind me. But yeah, so it's a 396 focal length equivalent, or full frame equivalent, which, reminding myself here, 396, yes, times 1.4. We put the 1.2 times teleconverter on it. So you have a 554 millimeter full frame equivalent once you put the teleconverter on it. Of course, that does bring your, 6.3? 5.6 times 1.4. Does bring your light level to an f-stop of 7.84. I say light level because depth of field is different when you're dealing with medium format. It goes backwards, so you're still at about 5.6 in terms of depth of field. So this is the only thing that I was pretty sure that I am going to pre-order, and I'm still pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure. I try never to be 100% sure of things until I actually do them. But it's just too useful for me. And it could have been 3,500 grams or more, and I probably still would have been down for the cause as long as the price was reasonable. And I would say the price is looking reasonable. The proof will be in the pudding. If there's something about the lens that I really don't like, I'm very curious if there's a Fresnel element in there, because they didn't say anything about it. But to be that light and that small, it seems very similar to me to the Nikkor. What was it? A 400 millimeter Fresnel lens. I forget now, but they released for the Z mount recently, and it was very light. It was good. There are a couple weaknesses with Fresnel elements, but we're not going to get into that right now. So at just 1,375 grams, though, oh my God, that was the biggest surprise. Okay, the price is $3,499. Let's just say $3,500. But it seems like a very good price, and the weight again, 1,375 grams, is really impressive. I believe that's lighter than my 250 millimeter lens, but it does beg a question: what's in the 250 millimeter lens that's not in the 500 that gives it that weight? So I was 100% sure that I was going to have to choose. If I have the 250 millimeter lens and the 500 millimeter, I'm going to have to choose which one am I going to take out each time I go out, because carrying around 5 kilograms of lens, which is what I assumed they would both weigh easily together, was just not really an option for my back. I've got issues. But at 1,375 grams suddenly, and the size too, I have 2 backpacks, 3 really, that I could fit both of these lenses in comfortably. So suddenly it's like, wow, okay, I can actually do some serious treks. Granted, my back is going to be sore by the end of the day, but I can do some serious treks and have these 2 available, so I can do the wider nature shots and the zoomed in amazing shots. Now, if only they would send it to me right now before the babies hatch. I'm in the let's just say near Yokohama area. Easy to get to. I can come to you and get the lens. Glad to pick it up for a few days. I want the 500 in my hands before the babies hatch in a day or 2 here, Fuji. So, anyways, bottom line is, yeah, I can carry them both around without too much pain. Little details. I mean, some people, oh, those are big details, but it's 21 elements and 14 groups. Got 2 super ED elements, 5 ED OIS. No, 5 ED. I wrote that wrong. It's got a bunch of elements. You don't need to know the details. Come on. Do you really? It's going to be nice optics. We know it. It's going to be GFX level optics. Maybe not as nice as the 250, if I'm being honest, but it's going to be nice. It's got 6 stops of OIS, minimal focal distance. So although in the X Summit I didn't hear them or see any text mentioning it, it is, according to B&H, a 2.8 millimeter minimal focal distance, which is 9.1 feet, which is good. It's good enough. And 0.2 maximum magnification, which not pseudo macro, but it's not bad. It's got 9 aperture blades. That's something else I didn't see there. It's got the tripod color, of course, and it's actually got a proper handle. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a handle. 95 millimeter front thread for the filter, which for most people, you're going to have to get one. I actually am lucky that I have a set for an IRIX lens that I have that's 95 millimeters, so I have a set of ND filters going from 8 to 1000. But yeah, dimensions, if you're interested, it's 4.1 inches by 9.7 inches. Again, that's tiny. I actually, is it smaller than mine? Let's find out. I actually have a tape measure here and a GF 250mm lens. Let's find out. So I will measure it without the cap on, because that is likely what they're doing here. Oh, wait. But I do have a back cap on. Excuse me. So it's 21 centimeters, which is basically an even 3 centimeters shorter, because it's actually a little bit closer to 21 and a half. So it's basically 3 centimeters shorter, a little bit over 1 inch shorter than the 500 millimeter lens. The diameter of this lens is about 10 and a half centimeters. That lens is 10.4. Yeah, so they're basically the exact same width. So the real test here is with the teleconverter on. Because with the teleconverter on, this 250 is a 350, but realistically it's like, I forget, like 280 full frame equivalent, something like that, 286 I think, 277 sounds familiar. So with the teleconverter on, this lens grows to basically exactly 24 centimeters. So we're looking at half a centimeter longer for the 500 millimeter versus a 350 millimeter. So size wise, that is impressive. So moving on to for a lot of people, what they're really waiting for. I'm just going to drop the price right now. It's $5,000. which was pretty much what everyone was expecting. The GFX 100S2. There's really very little new here. It does have the X5 processor, so it has the power to do a lot more. Okay, keep that in mind as I'm talking here. It has the power to do a lot more. It has ISO 80 now. It goes down to 80 from 100, like the 102 does. In extended, it drops to 40 versus 50 in the 100S, so not a lot of improvement there. It's said to have improved face and eye detection, subject deep learning, so this may be, that's probably a good thing. It should be using that well. Increased detection and moving subject tracking, so that kind of goes along with the face and eye stuff. It's just using the processor. It's got a better processor, so it should be doing that kind of stuff better, which is good. And I think that I could take advantage of that definitely with nature stuff. Though I haven't had, I mean, there are times, yes, it's not on doing what I want it to do, but a lot of the stuff I do is very, very difficult for any camera, even Sony, which I have shot with Sonys. I can trip up a Sony, so I'm not so confident that the processing power is going to be a massive improvement for me. It could be, and I definitely want to find out. So if nothing else, I want to try and get one to test in my hands. Again, Fujifilm. I know my channel is tiny, but I will show people. I will make your camera shine for sure. I'll show any weaknesses, but I'll also make it shine for sure. So the IBIS is increased to 8 stops, which is, again, good. I believe it's 7 in the 100S. And it's 883 grams, which is lighter. It's dual SD card once again, and this is one of the biggest disappointments for me. Okay, I've got a 512 gigabyte, or is it 256? I don't know, but it's a nice CF Express card that I was using in my Z6. My little humble Z6 with ZF Express. And how old is that camera? Like 6 years old or something? Jeez, man. So what are you doing, Fujifilm? Okay, I get it. You just want to recycle the same motherboard, and you don't want to. I get it. You just slapped a new processor on the same motherboard. You shouldn't have. You should have said, okay, we're gonna. Because that raises a whole bunch of other questions. Like, at least to me, I'm like, are you guys just recycling boards? Did you maybe pull off some processors from some unsold models? Because that gets a little weird, and potential for heat failures if not done just right. And even if done just right, it still weakens things. So, yeah, let's just get to the 100S2 versus 100S on some of this stuff here. The 100S2's ISO sensitivity range, again, so now it's 80 to 12,800. Extended is 40 to 25,600. The 100S now ISO sensitivity range is 100 to 12,800 in auto mode. Extended 50 to 102,400. So what? That seems like a big difference, doesn't it? So again, let me repeat that. In the 100S2, the extended's maximum is 25,600. In the 100S, the maximum is 102,400. Now, this is what I'm reading off the specs. Okay, most of this from B&H, some is from Fujifilm. Some of this may change, but as it stands right now, that was a big surprise. Now on the 100S2, continuous shooting. This is important to me. Okay, mechanical shutter up to 7 frames per second for up to 16 frames in RAW. There's no mention of JPEG here, and that's important, and I'll get to it in a second. Electronic shutter up to 4.1 frames per second for up to 24 frames in RAW. No mention of JPEG. Now in the 100S, it's up to 500 frames, or excuse me, that would be awesome, 5 frames per second for up to 16 frames. Same amount of frames, a little bit slower. Now, initially I was like, yeah, just 2 more frames, and even with 100 too, it was just 3 more frames. But I'm gonna say this in an optimistic way. If you imagine that was 3 times what it is, 15 frames versus 21 frames per second, that's a significant uptick in frames. And for me personally, I do a lot of kingfisher photography, and when it's diving, a lot of times it's the difference between having the really nice position because they are so fast when they dive. So I'm lucky if I have 3 frames of him actually between the beginning of the dive to hitting the water and coming back. I'll say 4. I'm lucky to get 4. So if I have 7 frames per second, I'm likely to get 1 or 2 more shots of him between the dive and the water. And that's significant because I'll likely get a better shot almost every time he dives, assuming that the autofocus keeps up, because that is something the Kingfisher definitely challenges the autofocus. So if the new autofocus can keep up with the Kingfisher in more scenarios than I'm getting right now, I'm not going to say all because Kingfisher challenges every camera system, but that would be great. Now, in electronic shutter on the 100S is 2 frames per second, so that's a pretty big difference for up to 45 frames in RAW. But unlimited, I forgot to say that. So 42 frames on the first one, the mechanical shutters, 42 frames in JPEG. So that's pretty good. But I found in my copy, it's much, much more than that. Much, much more. So I don't know what's up there. But at 2 frames per second, and that's what I'm shooting, by the way, and that's what I'm shooting at 5 frames per second without a doubt. But here it says at 2 frames per second, you have up to 45 frames in RAW, but unlimited in JPEG. And definitely I found that to be the case, but in the fast mode, I'm still getting not unlimited, but way more than 42 frames per second. Electronic shutter up to 2.9 frames per second in the 100S. I think I said that was 4.1 in the 102, and 64 frames in JPEG, which is interesting, right? Because you don't get the unlimited in electronic shutter for some reason. Oh, so that's RAW. Oh, yeah, in JPEG, yeah. So there's really no I said this wrong. Now, in regards to actual shutter speed, I'm not talking frames per second, but actual shutter speed, there's not really any improvements except for the maximum shutter duration of 30 seconds is now available in program mode, program priority. And that's grayed out in the 100S. So that is an improvement, but it's kind of weird that you would think that would just be a firmware thing. So it should come to the 100S. Electronic front curtain now has a max speed of 1/8,000th of a second versus 1/4,000th on the 100S, so that's another improvement. However, the slowest speed is now 30 seconds versus 3,600 seconds on a 100S, unless you go to bulb mode. So that's interesting, right? So there's no mention of video specs, or there were. Okay, I'm going to read this as written. There's some surprises coming here, okay? There's no mention of video specs for the 100S too, but reviewers with pre-firmware copies have said it has the same as 100S, which would be very disappointing. Color temperature is no longer listed in the white balance presets. Interesting. EVF is now 5.7 million dots, up from 3.7 million, which is significant, and it may be the sole deciding factor for many, myself included, as I have very sensitive eyes, and I am sensitive to lack of detail. There's also an increase in magnification from 0.77 to 0.84 times, which is basically 10%, which is significant. And the diopter is now adjustable from -5 to +3, which is up from -4 to +2 on the 100S. So I, for one, do find the 100S EVF, like I'm saying here, it hurts my eyes a lot, and this may kind of be Fuji's way of apologizing for the suffering eyesight of 100S and 50S2 users. Haha, just kidding, Fuji. Send the 500mm, please. So here's where things take a turn, because as I was writing this, as I was learning about this camera from various sources, information was added, and that's the catch and why I didn't release this right away. So basically, I was waiting for info and looking at all I could get my hands on to be as accurate as possible. through YouTubers, websites, and even online shops, but all of them can make mistakes. Even Fuji themselves can make mistakes. So please understand if things have changed over time since you watched this video, and some things I said, I won't say maybe, likely are wrong now, so check carefully. But I just found perhaps the biggest glimmering little bit of hope on Fujifilm's site themselves. And it's under the dual SD information for card types. So below the card type capacities, I saw SSD up to 2 terabytes. So this gets better too, okay? Because again, this is evolving as I wrote it. So if this is indeed what it looks like at face value, the 100S2 can record out to SSDs over USB-C, ideally in both video and photo modes, but I would settle for just video, honestly. But to be able to not rely on the SDXC cards limits for photos as well would be so good. So even if it's not in there right now, I would say add it. Fuji, please add it if you can. No, I don't think Fuji actually made a mistake here. In fact, I know they didn't, because it's coming. You'll see. This is evolving. So also in regards, though, to frame rates, I'm coming back to it, I promise. In regards to frame rates, I found a plethora of information there as well. And rather than just read a long list, here's that list. So please pause and read at your leisure. And since I know he only alluded to it in the summit without saying it directly, yes, Reala Ace, however you want to say it, is one of the new film simulations in the 100S2. Now, now. Under movie specifications, you can clearly see SSD and SD. Now, here's where it potentially becomes very interesting. When you go down a little bit, 4K resolution, right? And we see ProRes 422, movie 1, whatever. Very high bit rate, if you'll notice. And then please notice the frame rate. And here again, ProRes Lite, 870 megabits per second, 59.94, excuse me. Now, nowhere next to that do I see anything to signify that this is not 4K. HQ is not HD, just in case you don't know. That's HQ, high quality, okay? So nowhere do I see anything to signify that they're not talking about 4K. Come on, where's the 120? Where's the 240, right? Anyways, hopefully that's a firmware upgrade coming, because obviously it has the processing power. But by the way, also down here, look, see here, they're very careful to say full HD, ProRes, high Q. Do you see that? This is still ProRes high Q movie. ProRes high Q movie 59.94. ProRes FHD 59.94, okay? So it does seem like it has 4K 60, but here's the catch slash don't consider it a catch, because it's an awesome thing. When we go way down here, I'm still looking at these. I'm not going to read these right now because they're too interesting. But when you go way down here, there is this ProRes codec can be recorded to only SSD. So we have a triple verification here of the SSD recording. Never ever does it say external monitor with SSD. It just says SSD. Now let's hope, again, this is not one of those little, oh, we failed to mention, we just assumed that you knew we were talking about a Ninja 5 and a Blackmagic video assist or whatever. No. You said SSD, okay? And that's what it should be, and it better be. You can output via USB-C to an SSD, and you can do 4K 60p, which is significant. Not only because it's 4K 60p and it's nice, it's going to be great, but it opens the door for 1080, at least 120 frames per second, but realistically, there should be a 240 frames per second option coming with firmware updates, if not upon release. Now, my suspicion here is, Fuji got a lot of shit in the past when they released the 100S because the price was so much less than the original 100, and could do basically everything that the 100 could do. It had one less function button in the front, and it had, it didn't have the vertical grip and the nice batteries that weren't really that nice. Anyways, so there was a lot more time difference between the release of the 100 and the 100S than there was of the 100-2 and now this 100S2. I mean, a lot more. There was a couple years. This is now just a couple months, basically a few months. So yeah, so they might just be A, trying not to piss anyone off, at least not immediately, and B, trying not to take away from sales, because again, I hate thinking like marketing people because it's dirty, but if they were being smart, dirty people, they would release an under-spec'd camera in terms of video, because you're still trying to sell the more expensive 100-2, and the sales on that camera I don't think are astonishing, because it's an expensive camera. No matter how good it is, it's not going to sell like hotcakes because it's expensive. So a lot of people were waiting for this 100S2 to see what the price would be and what the specs would be. Now you release it and it's good enough. It's a little bit of an upgrade from the 100S, but it's lacking those video specs. I realize a lot of medium format people, I only care about photos, but there are those of us that also care about video too. And also, if you don't see that, there's something else I'm going to mention in a second. I just noticed. But so now you wait a few months. You release the camera, and then either at that time you say, okay, here, guess what? We also have this coming. Or it's here now, but probably they'll say with a firmware update this is going to come, because at the sale time then they want to boost the sales by saying also this will be coming soon, which a lot of camera companies do. Like with firmware, like 4K 60, that was a big one where like a lot of camera companies, they released it as 4K 24 or 30, and then they said 4K 60 coming with firmware updates. So that could be the case. I think very likely something to that effect anyways, is they're just trying to get as many people now that are disappointed and jump on the 100-2 first, and the people who are okay with this camera are going to jump on it anyways, the 100S2. But then when the timing is right, they'll say, by the way, this also can do this and this and this and this and this, and then suddenly the sales for this will go through the roof. They're smart if they do it at release. At least announce the firmware at release, because you want to grab people while their attention is there. But anyways, so that's it. I think that's amazing. Like just the fact that it can record out to SSD, for me, that's something since the Sigma FP that I've wanted and thought every camera should do. It just should be a thing, because not only is it cheaper than the SD cards, easier to transfer or work off of. You can just plug it right into your computer and work off of it. You can do that with a CF Express card too, but which is actually an NVMe card if you don't know. But here we have the SSD option, which also there's adapters for NVMe's to SSDs and all that sort of stuff. So, and then it also takes heat away from your camera, because you're no longer generating that heat in the SD card in the camera itself. So that's a huge thing too, which is why they should have no problem doing things like 240 frames per second. If the XH2 can do it, do not tell me. If the little XS10 can do 240 frames per second, do not tell me, Fujifilm, that this camera, or even that my 100S cannot do it, because we know it can do it. So stop messing with us and just give us 240 frames per second. For wildlife, come on, it's needed. All right. So that pretty much wraps this up. Little short plug, I am T Mellon. I am Film-Studio-Japan.com, also Film-Studio-Taku. Used to be my only name, but then I saw some company jacked that, and I didn't want to bother with a fight, so I just changed it. Nobody threatened me with a fight. I was considering the fight, and I was like, nah, whatever. So, anyways, bottom line is, I just want to say that I do sell prints at Film-Studio-Japan.com, and I am going to be greatly expanding those prints very soon, as in there will be a lot more available. It was kind of a beta site that I was working on, and had to go back to the real world for work for a while and took a break from working on the website. But the stuff that's on there, there's still some good stuff, including the monkey print. You should check it out. It's really, really nice. And it's most of the prints there, including the monkey stuff, is GFX 100S, 100 megapixel goodness. You can print it as big as you can imagine, and it will be gorgeous. So, and you know, I also do custom orders for Japanese washi paper prints, which if you've never seen washi paper, there's a lot of different types actually. Ilford has some very expensive washi paper, but I'm pretty sure they're just getting Japanese made washi paper sent to them and marking it up. Don't quote me on that, but anyways, there's some beautiful washi paper. I have a favorite washi paper which will for now go unnamed because stock is getting low, and it prints so amazing. And I do custom orders and I ship from Japan for the washi paper. Everything else goes through WHCC in the US, which is a very, very high-end print studio. And in Canada and the US, the shipping is very simple. You can just order there and it'll come directly to you. For any other countries, it's better to send me a message there or contact me directly here in messages. I'm happy to respond and work something out with you. So that rounds it up for the Fuji X Summit talk. I will talk to you soon about this stuff. I'm more focused on my art, and this is really not the direction I want to go with my stuff. But I decided if it's products that are useful to me personally, or if I think that I can help other people with something that I'm knowledgeable of, I will do my best. But for the most part, consider my channel somewhere to come and watch some beautiful art. Portrait sessions of beautiful girls, I like to do that too. Nature stuff, absolutely. So thank you for watching Film-Studio-Taku-in-Japan. Otaku is like a nerd, by the way, if you don't know. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.